I'm Bruce Maxwell. I'm at Montana State University. I'm the MSU Director of the Institute on Ecosystems, and I'm here to talk to you about the Montana Climate Assessment that we just released, just been published. And I'm going to just give you a brief overview of it. We have available the executive summary, and you can get a copy of it in the other room or here. I've got a few here, but be sure to grab one of those. If you go online to montanaclimate.org, you can get the full 9 yards. So there's printed copies. There's only a few, so they're very expensive. I'll tell you a little bit about the climate assessment. Kathy Whitlock was the lead author. She was the past director of the IOE. We have a chapter on climate, and Kelson and Nick Silverman were the lead authors on that. They're from the Montana Climate Office at U of M. Agriculture was done by myself and Dr. Reed at MSU. And forestry was done by Ashley Valentine and Lisa Wade. By the way, there are longer lists of authors for each one of these sections, but these were the lead people on each one. So the forestry was done at U of M, and then water was led by White Cross and at MSU. We just released it in September. Stand back here a little bit. So we address, as you can see by the authors, we address climate, water, agriculture, and forest. Those are basically chapters in this assessment. Montana's climate future is something that we, of course, focused on, but we also focused on what are the current patterns. And when I say current patterns going back over the last 30 to 50 years. What are those patterns, and then what are the projected patterns using the best science models that we can find. Very quick summary of some of the findings of the assessment. Atmospheric CO2 concentrations, like the global atmospheric concentrations, have increased in about over 100 parts per million since Montana became a state. So that is about double of what the variation that we've known to be the variation in climate, in CO2 in the atmosphere over the last 800,000 years. So we've about doubled. That's a lot. Okay? We've never seen anything like this, is the point. So average temperatures since 1950, average statewide temperatures have increased by about 25 degrees per decade, with the greatest warming in the spring. The projected to increase by 3 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-century, with greatest warming in summer and winter in the southeast part of the state. Greatest warming, but all of the state is due to warm, and we're fairly confident about that. Maximum temperatures have increased most of the spring and are projected to increase 3 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-century, with greatest increases in August and in the southeast. So in the projections, it's looking like summers and winters are going to get warmer. But summers in particular. This last summer was a very good forecast for what we're projected to be seeing in terms of temperatures. Days over 90, extreme heat days are projected to increase by 5 to 35 additional days by mid-century. This summer, July, we had 22 days over 90. The other 11 were over 80. And that period of over 90 days, over 90 degree days, started in the last week of June. That's unheard of in the history. Minimum temperatures have increased most in winter and spring and are projected to increase 3 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-century, with greatest increase in January and in the southeast. Frost-free days are projected to increase by 24 to 44 days by mid-century, particularly in the west. That could be good news for market gardeners. A lot more varieties might become available. There might be some good news in this. But you gotta have water to grow things, and that's going to be problematic. Minimum temperatures have increased most in the winter and spring. I already said that. Frost-free days are projected to increase by 24 to 44 days. So that change in the number of days. The darker the green, the more change or more increase in growing degree days basically across the state. So that's and that's under two different predictions. One is a prediction of having about 450 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we're right at 400 right now. If we go to 850, which is most likely under business as usual toward the end of the century, then we're looking at this scenario. Precipitation, statewide precipitation has decreased in winter by 0.14 inches per decade since 1950, but no significant change has occurred in annual mean precipitation, probably because of very slight increases in spring and fall precipitation. And that pattern of increasing precipitation in spring and fall is what the models are predicting, but we have very low confidence in those models on precipitation. So that's what we see there. Statewide decrease in summer and increased year-to-year variability in precipitation are projected. These are the projections. Again, it would take me a long time to explain what these two are, but just there are two different scenarios of carbon dioxide, basically. One for about what we expect to see mid-century, one what we'll see at the end of the century. But the change in precipitation is predicted to be greatest in spring and winter, actually, and about the same actually in the fall, but very much a decrease in the summer. Again, this last summer was probably a pretty good forecast of what we're likely to see. As we did this assessment, we divided the state into the 7 climatic regions that NOAA uses. It turns out that these also match the agricultural region, so it's a good way to do our analysis. We have that fully broken down in the report. We can get all the details about that. What does this mean for water? Just a few key findings from the water. Between 1950 and 2015, snowpack has declined, especially since the 1980s. We have earlier spring runoff. Stream flow is influenced by warming and climate variability. It seems to be pretty closely related in Montana anyway, in western Montana in particular, to the ENSO events, the El Nino La Nina effect. So, as you just saw, it came out in the paper, or maybe you just saw this, that yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, it came out that we are looking like we might go into La Nina. That means we get an extra wet winter. Right now, we're in a neutral condition, and so it's very hard to predict what that is. A couple of key findings: decreasing snowpack will reduce late season irrigation capacity, which will mostly affect hay production, sugar beets, malt barley, the garden species that we'd see in market gardens, and potato production. 90 will impact wheat and stress livestock. We're probably not going to be able to grow winter wheat for much longer. Spring wheat. Winter wheat will have to take over for winter wheat, primarily because at pollination, with degrees with a lot of days over 90, pollen just dries up and we don't get the fertilization from the plant. And spring wheat ends up being right at that hot period. It's like an increase in the summer. We're due to see an increase in winter annual weeds because they survive the winter so much better than they used to. Basically, this is the idea that when these plants are actually fertilizing and these anthers are extruded, and you have to get this pollen onto the stigma so you can get fertilization. It's just too hot for that process to basically occur for over 90 degrees. Key messages for forests: we're going to have more fires. We're going to have a lot. Again, this was a good forecast this summer. I want to end with this idea because we were supposed to speak a little bit toward leadership and following the theme of the meeting. And what are the kinds of leadership that we need? Well, it's very interesting. In my case, we visited lots and lots of agricultural organizations around the state. And we were met by a leadership that was very reluctant to get involved with climate change activities. Their membership, on the other hand, was totally about being involved with climate change and learning about climate change. So it was, once you got below the political level, everything was fine. And so I think that's a really important finding. The other thing, in terms of leadership, I think personal behaviors are really important, and that's why I turn to the Buddhist statement. I'm not promoting Buddhism. I'm kind of a Jack Buddhist myself, but it is recently, this is a great statement about I think where we have to come from philosophically about who we are and what we are and how we interact with the environment. Okay, sorry that I took.
No problem. Thanks, Bruce. And Steve, you're up.
Wow, I'm impressed that you're able to pull that off in 10 minutes. 10 minutes and 30 seconds, that's good, Bruce. My name is Steve Thompson, and I'm the chairman of Climate Smart Glacier Country. We're a new partnership in the Flathead Valley. We're all volunteer, and so we don't have any staff, and I'm sort of serving that role as chairman because I started the group, so I feel some responsibility to make sure that we progress. Been around for, I think we incorporated last maybe December, so we've been around for less than a year. And it's an interesting partnership. We have Glacier National Park, we got the city of Whitefish, we got Xanterra and Glacier National Park Lodges, Rob and Kelson, a good seed company, is on our board of directors. And then we have 6 different working groups. Climate change, that's all I do is climate change related stuff, which is hard to sustain. So we'll have to have another session about mental health because seriously, I mean, there's a fierce urgency of now to address this. I mean, when Bruce says it's a big deal that we haven't had CO2 levels for 800,000 years, I mean, that's not just a big deal, that's like a really big deal. And actually, that's what we know. It probably goes back maybe 10 million years. I mean, we are, in my lifetime, when I first became aware of this phenomenon of the greenhouse gas effect, we had 342 parts per million of CO2. Now we are, 406, 408? It's increasing 2 or 3 parts per million per year. We are living at the pivotal point in human civilization. Homo sapiens have only been walking the earth for 200, 300,000 years. So, I mean, we are totally in new territory. And it's not just something that's in the future that's going to happen to somebody else. It's already happening. And I think this year, I mean, we're not going to see every year is going to be like this last summer, but the normal distribution of weather patterns is shifting dramatically, and it's happening right now. So at this time when we've got this huge urgency of now to address this gargantuan challenge to all of life on Earth, we also see our social and political institutions unraveling. We had great hope just a couple years ago on the climate change front when the Paris Accords were approved by all the nations of the world, and then an election happened last November, and the leader of the free world is missing in action. In fact, leading in the wrong direction. I guess we're still leading, but there's a lot of crazy things going on. It's not just happening in the United States. You know all this. That's the context in which we're operating. So, what I'm here to talk about is where the focus of action is. And that focus of action is here. It's in local communities, particularly in red states like Montana and a lot of the country where people tend to live on the land and are going to be directly impacted by it. International systems are not going to effectively address this issue. Really some great things going on in technology in the business world, but they're dealing with slices of the big picture. But the big picture is solutions and vision and leadership is not happening at our national level, definitely not happening at the international level. They're just trying to hold together a global order without nuking each other. So some real challenges there. In the United States, we've got some cool things going on in places like California and Minnesota and Vermont. So there is some nodes of state leadership. But by and large, where the action is happening in communities. And it was interesting, as soon as DT, I don't like to say his name, pulled out of Paris, cities all over the country stepped up and said, we're not letting go of Paris. We're all in this together. And so we had quite a few cities here in Montana, led by Bozeman, Whitefish, Helena, Missoula stepped up and joined the mayor's declaration that we're going to be part of the solution. We are not letting go. The United States is going to continue to provide leadership. So that idea of local solutions and localism embedded in regional networks, like the mayor's conference. Boy, with the technology and communications, the way that moves so quickly, and it happened sort of organically. It wasn't like this great, organizing faction out there that said, we just got to call the mayors and get them. It came from the bottom up. So that's very hopeful, but it illustrates my point that where the action is local, embedded in regional, national, international networks. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about climate-smart glacier country. I subscribe to the niche theory of community climate action. There's a lot of different approaches. What we're doing is fairly unique, but not totally unique because we really are learning from our colleagues in Missoula at Climate Smart Missoula, which is really sort of tackling community solutions through partnerships and networks within a community. Amy's here someplace, isn't she? Amy Sillenberg is with the Missoula Community Foundation and Climate Smart Missoula, and they've really been pioneering some of this here.
It's true, but Steve gave us our names, so
that's another story.
Yeah.
We have other efforts. So like what we do, we're not involved in advocacy or activism. We're not marching on the city hall. We're focused on trying to build partnerships and focus on local solutions. Another approach would be Citizens Climate Lobby. Is Kristen here? There's Kristen, the Citizens Climate Lobby. They have a very particular niche. They are quietly diplomatic, and they're working with all the people in Congress to try to institute a carbon tax, a revenue-neutral carbon tax. So that's a particular niche. Some people are going to be perfect at that, and I encourage you to be diplomatic and not hot-headed like I sometimes am. I'm not a good fit for that. Then we have frontline groups that are activist groups, like 350.org. And there's different, there's 350 Montana and Missoula. We got one up in the Flathead. So that's another approach. All those things are important. So what we're focused on is the local solutions. And we're doing it across the board. Adaptation, mitigation, and education. So we're preparing for the changes that are already in the work. We're trying to reduce our contribution about it. But right now, what we've really been focused on for our first year is just the education, to try to build community conversations about this issue. People do not like to talk about climate change because somebody gave them the notion, or some buddies gave them the notion that physics is a political ideology, and that this is a politically fraught issue, and if you believe in climate change, then you're this, and if you don't believe in climate change, then you're this, and we are not even having a reality-based conversation. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to force the issue, to break the spiral of silence, so that we are talking about reality, and climate change is happening, it's happening now, and we can be part of the solution, and it can be good for our economy. So this fall we've got a series of community conversations about climate change. The first one we did in late September was we showed the film Tomorrow, and we had small group discussions afterwards, and it was hopeful. It was about the whole concept of localism and regional and global networks. I mean, that's our sort of our vision of how all these things come together. What the heck does microcurrency have to do with climate solutions? Well, watch a movie, it all fits in together. So that's something that people got to have a vision, people got to have hope. And so we wanted to lead off our community conversations with that. It was very successful. Then on Monday, we brought Bruce and his team up from University of Montana and MSU to have a climate science day. Had 3.5 hours focused on the Montana climate assessment. We had local respondents, local farmers, foresters, water experts. In the evening, the Glacier National Park superintendent talked about what climate change means for Glacier National Park. In a couple weeks, it's hunting season, so we're going to have a multimedia evening with hunters, fishermen, and skiers. You know, if you like snow, trout need snow too, don't they? Do our native trout need snow? Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to take it to that audience. And so that's again going to sort of talk about the threats and sort of the solutions there. We're trying to mobilize people. And then our fourth one is going to be in Columbia Falls, so we're spreading this all over the Flathead Valley.